we can see there's compassion there, there's awareness, there's acceptance and understanding that we're meeting this moment. We're not shirking back, we're not avoiding, but we're actually showing up differently. And it's a choice to meet this moment. And the differently might not be perfect. In fact, it won't be perfect. We're not saying I meet this moment with perfection, but just differently.
Welcome to the Sober Edge podcast, inspiration for alcohol-free living. I'm your host, Teri Patterson, functional nutritionist and This Naked Mind senior coach. The Sober Edge is a place to explore the infinite possibilities on the other side of drinking. In a culture soaked in booze, discover the wonder and joy of taking a different path. Meet real people living lives of purpose and passion. Learn the truth behind the alcohol myths and get ready to be motivated, inspired, and astounded by what is possible with the Sober Edge.
Well, hey everyone, it's Teri back with another edition of the Sober Edge podcast. So happy to be here with you today. And I'm going to talk about something I don't think I've ever shared before on the podcast. And that is this topic of self-sabotage. And it's a fascinating topic to me because I've been working with clients now for almost 7 years around changing their relationship with alcohol. And this idea of getting out of our own way and where sabotage shows up, what's really underneath that is a really important recognition of what we go through during our breakup with alcohol and after. And so I want to invite you into a little thought exercise as we start. I want to invite you to think about something you genuinely want right now. More peace, consistency, confidence, maybe it's more ease. And what tends to get in the way, not because you don't care, but because something in you hesitates. And that hesitation is what I want to bring forward today. What is it that holds us back that can almost feel like we can't get out of our own way? So, the definition of self sabotage is the act of unconsciously hindering one's own progress, often due to deeply ingrained limiting beliefs. And so these deeply ingrained limiting beliefs is really key here because we're unconsciously living out what we believe, the stories we tell ourselves. And there's so much power in those stories. And what's true is these beliefs stem from past experiences, fears, or societal conditioning that creates that internal resistance that keeps us just the other side of success, happiness, or change. And so we want to think about this in terms of it's an unconscious hindering. And we often can connect the dots between those ingrained limiting beliefs, the limiting beliefs that tell us we're not capable of change. This is too hard. We'll never get there. It's not worth it. We're not worth it. We're not smart enough, strong enough, confident enough, whatever that story is. And remember, these stories are powerful. And so part of the work we get to do is bring them into our conscious state. So, one of the things that really deserves a lot of attention is our nervous system. And so, what I've recognized since I stopped drinking alcohol over 10 years ago is that I wasn't very attuned to my nervous system. And so, as I have worked on understanding my own limitations, patterns, stories, the culmination of this, or the beginning of this for me, the next step was really the nervous system certification that I took last fall. And so I want to bring that into this idea of self sabotage. So, if we think of it as a nervous system strategy, I think it changes our awareness, understanding, and even maybe our acceptance of self sabotage. So, your nervous system, as we know, is wired for safety, which means it's not wired for growth. If you think about your comfort zone, think of that circle. I'm holding my hands up with a circle. There's the comfort zone. And just on the crest of the comfort zone is the fear zone. And just adjacent to the fear zone is the growth zone. And so when we're in that comfort zone, that growth zone is not only far away, it's also, you know, um, challenged by the fear zone. And so when change feels unfamiliar, our body may interpret it as danger. And so self sabotage can show up when our nervous system is in that fight state, self criticism, when we feel like we're pushing against the world. It can show up in the flight stage, the procrastination, the avoidance, and it can show up in the freeze state, numbing, shutdown. So let's imagine for a moment that self sabotage is not just a mindset problem, but it's actually about regulation. It's actually about building safety. That can change our understanding and our acceptance of how we move past self sabotage. So we can get in our own way when it comes to this idea of understanding where we're bumping up against these beliefs. And so if we look at the neuroscience behind this, we see that our amygdala, right, the emotional seat of our brain, um, that activation is where our brain can interpret growth as danger and it can trigger that stress response. And then remember our old friend, cognitive dissonance. So, cognitive dissonance is holding two conflicting beliefs. For example, I'm not worthy and I deserve peace. And so, when we have those two conflicting thoughts or beliefs, it creates that internal stress that we often resolve by just reverting to the comfort zone, to the familiar pattern. And so we can subconsciously sabotage when things start going well. And I recently read a book by Gay Hendricks called The Big Leap, and he talks about that upper limit problem. And that upper limit problem is directly connected to that sabotage, where when things start going well, it can feel uncomfortable and even frightening because we're not used to it. So we're way outside of our comfort zone. We're moving into that growth zone, and it can trigger that amygdala activation and really highlight any cognitive dissonance we have about growth. So, what are the most common types of self sabotage? We see procrastination, perfectionism, poor self care, not prioritizing ourselves, setting boundaries. It can even come down to not willing to, take care of ourselves with enough sleep or movement or stress relief techniques. Self criticism is a big one. And then resisting change. So all of these can bubble up when our nervous system is activated and we are finding that the idea of change is really frightening. So here's the thing to understand is that in order to shift our response, we need to experience evidence of something different. And so, if we think about how our brain grows and changes, we're really talking about neuroplasticity. And so, how do we create new neural pathways? Well, neuroplasticity requires repetition without threat. So if we repeat things and we can do it in a way that we're modulated for safety, awareness, calm, grounding, each compassionate interruption weakens that old pathway. So what it means is that We have to learn to calm ourselves enough, ground ourselves enough that we can practice these interruptions. And we want to do it with compassion so that we continue to feel safe. We continue to feel held. We continue to be able to stay out of that threat response because that neuroplasticity requires that we repeat it again and again and again. So, recognizing how we do this and let go of the admonishment, the punishment, the criticism that we often face when we're in that growth mode. So, reminding ourselves that setbacks are a part of learning, not failure. And noticing that each time you pause and regulate and choose differently, you're rewiring those old pathways. You're starting to create that new neural pathway that allows you to move out of self sabotage and into curiosity, acceptance, and ultimately growth. And so know that often our progress looks quieter than we expect. And so we have to be patient with ourselves. And I am the queen of impatience. It's hard for me. Moving into periods of stagnation feels challenging. Allowing myself to sit in discomfort, removing some of the urgency to fix something or react has been one of the ways that I'm rewiring my nervous system. And so we could, try this anchor phrase together, which has been helpful for me. I can meet this moment differently. I'm going to say that again. I can meet this moment differently. And we can see there's compassion there, there's awareness, there's acceptance and understanding that we're meeting this moment. We're not shirking back, we're not avoiding, but we're actually showing up differently. And it's a choice to meet this moment. And the differently might not be perfect. In fact, it won't be perfect. We're not saying I meet this moment with perfection, but just differently. And as we see how that different feels, our brain is going to have evidence. And if that evidence feels calming and grounded, then we can lean in and repeat that action with compassion again and again and again as the first part of this new repatterning of changing our response and moving away from self sabotage. So, what is resistance all about? We do see that this can be quite challenging to show up in a new way. And so, some of the resistance you know, um, is that fear of failure or fear of success. How many of you can recognize that? Sometimes we take ourselves out of the game so that we don't have to, we don't have to lose or we don't have to win. And isn't that interesting? And so it can lead to procrastination or self-doubt. And that self-doubt can come whether we are telling ourselves, well, I probably would have failed anyway, or there's no way that was going to pan out. Or it can even be like, man, what if it works out and I get that job? Do I really want to work that hard? Do I really want to put myself on the line? Am I ready to challenge myself in those new ways? And so fear of failure or fear of success can be a big part of resistance. And then we often carry this negative self perception. And I'm even going to say it as negative self protection. Like our nervous system can really create that sense of the easiest way to move through this day and to feel safe is to not challenge myself, not do anything new, not move out of this comfort zone. And yes, our nervous system might feel safe, but there's no growth. There's no exciting challenge. There's no novelty, something new. There's often nothing to look forward to if we stay stuck in that same Groundhog Day, that hamster wheel, that same old, same old. And so this negative self perception can result in behaviors that reinforced our unworthiness. See, I knew I wasn't suited for the job, or see, they chose someone else. They probably would have chose them anyway. Whatever that is, that can be part of resistance. And then that comfort zone attachment that I've been talking about, this can prevent us from growing even when change is beneficial. And so anytime we move out of our comfort zone, we're going to have one foot in the comfort zone and one foot in the fear zone. And our job is to get both feet into the fear zone and one foot into the growth zone. So we start to see that even though we might be skited, as Glennon Doyle says, scared and excited, it's worth it. And so staying in that comfort zone is that slow death of lethargy, of giving up, of maybe playing small. And I don't know about you, but that sense of self stuck, repeating the same patterns, not feeling able to challenge myself, living in my own head, and lots of criticism and self doubt. That was how I operated when I was drinking. And so when I think about ways that I've grown and what I have learned, I want to move out of my comfort zone often and early. So I want to invite you to pause for a moment here and ask, where do you notice self sabotage might be showing up right now? Where do you notice it? What's going on in your internal world, your external world? What are the challenges you're facing? What are the exciting opportunities ahead? Where is self sabotage showing up? And why? What might this pattern be protecting you from? What's it protecting you from? Where's your nervous system getting all red fire alarm? If this pattern had something positive, a positive intention, what might it be? What might it be? So, one of the most powerful things we can ask ourselves is, what's the trade off here? What's the gain? Humans are pretty much wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. And so that means that unless there's a payoff, we often don't do it. So the payoff can be like, oh, nobody will be disappointed. The payoff might be, I don't have to stretch myself or grow. It might be, I can devote more time to my family if I don't challenge myself in these new ways. I don't have to change. No one will be disappointed, whatever that looks like. So, if it had a positive intention, what might it be? And if this is a hard exercise for you, that might be good. It might mean that there's work, there's uncovering to do. We've got to dig out of some of these old patterns. We've got to ask ourselves hard questions. So, if you get stuck, try completing this sentence as a helpful tool. A part of me learned this behavior when, and then fill in the blank. A part of me learned this behavior when I was small and I was rewarded for not rocking the boat. A part of me learned this behavior when I let other people go first and then I knew what to do next. So pay attention to what comes up during these questions. So, I want to talk about how our nervous system can be the pathway out of self sabotage. So, here's a very simple 5-step framework that I call the path. So, the nervous system path to change. So, one, regulate the body. So, can be as simple as breathing, grounding, naming 2 things you can see and 3 things you can touch. Something simple to regulate the body. And then name the pattern. What's going on here? What's underneath? What is happening? Oh, yeah, this is me resisting change. This is me criticizing myself into guilt. This is me, whatever the pattern is. This is me selling myself short, playing small. This is me crawling back into my comfort zone. This is me choosing avoidance over communication. Name the pattern. And then number three, understand the protection. What am I looking to protect myself from? I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to get disappointed. I don't want to disappoint others. I don't want to risk my financial safety or my relationship. So, what's the protection? What's the trade off? What's keeping you in that pattern? Number four, choose a small step that feels like a safer alternative. Go 5% there. If you are struggling with your primary relationship and there are patterns and protection and self sabotage in place, and your nervous system gets full fight or flight or freeze or fawn when you think about having a hard conversation, regulate the body, name the pattern, understand the protection, and then maybe have one part of the conversation. Maybe journal about the conversation. Choose that safer alternative so that you can get out of that pattern of being stuck and make a small foray into that place of growth. And then repeat with compassion. Keep doing it again and again to change that pathway, to create new evidence for your brain that this is safe, this is working. What this means, as your brain has more evidence, the next time this choice comes up, you're going to move in that new direction, or you'll have equal opportunity to move in the new direction without shutting down and going into that old pattern of self sabotage. And it matters to regulate first because a dysregulated nervous system cannot access new behavior. If your body thinks you're unsafe, it's going to default to those old patterns. So it's important to recognize that you cannot outthink a stressed or shut down nervous system. A dysregulated nervous system doesn't respond to just thought work. Regulation is what creates access to choice. I'm going to say that again. Regulation is what creates access to choice because the regulation means that you're safe enough to use emotional regulation, to use your prefrontal cortex to problem solve. So regulation creates access to choice. Even 30 to 60 seconds of safety can change your brain activity. How cool is that? So grounding enough to just breathe in safety for 30 to 60 seconds can start our brain on the pathway to self-regulation versus self-sabotage. So some simple practices we can do to explore those 30 to 60 seconds. Hand on chest and slowly exhale. Short inhale, long exhale with hand on chest. Name 3 things you can see and 2 things you can feel. Gentle movements. Roll your shoulders. One of my favorite is I actually put my hands on my shoulders and I drop my shoulders. And boy, do I feel a release of tension. So that allows me to recognize my body has been holding on to something. That relaxation and lowering of my shoulders signals safety. And from there, remember, now I can use my thinking brain. I can start to create new evidence and I can move into that beautiful place of self regulation. So, as we think about the way these patterns show up, we want to be very careful to name the pattern without judging what it is, how we're navigating it, what we're really feeling. And it matters because shame is one of the things that can really reinforce sabotage. And if we use curiosity, we can activate the prefrontal cortex and reduce that emotional reactivity, that response from the amygdala. So notice what you do when discomfort shows up and separate that from who you are. Awareness can interrupt those automatic loops, and we can understand that the response that we feel is what our nervous system learned, and there's no judgment there. And so try this. Uh, Try distancing yourself by using some different language. So instead of, oh, I'm such a procrastinator, or there I go procrastinating again, you might say, I'm noticing a procrastination response, or this feels like a freeze pattern. Oh, there's a part of me that's trying to protect me. And so, again, it matters that we name the pattern without judgment so we don't fall into more resistance, more messiness when it comes to self sabotage. So, as we look at what is happening with the pattern and that protective role, this is another part that I want to invite you to consider. So, every sabotage pattern exists because it once worked. And so when we honor that and say, oh, I see you were protecting me by helping me avoid difficult conversations, or I notice this protective pattern of rage when I feel fear, and I honor that once that felt protective. And so as we honor whatever this is, and as we identify it, our nervous system can soften. Just think about clenching your fists in front of you and how our resistance gets exasperated and elevated. And then release your hands in front of you. Open your hands, lower your shoulders. This is what's happening when we can identify and honor the role that our nervous system has played. So, common protections include we might have been protecting ourselves from rejection, failure, emotional overwhelm, disappointment, fear. And so ask this question instead. If this behavior had a job, what would it be? And that's a beautiful way of identifying what is really going on underneath while we step back from that judgment. And the next thing that we really want to focus on to move away from self sabotage after we see the path to change, when we regulate and then we name the pattern without judgment, and then we identify and honor that protective role, the next thing we want to do is a regulated alternate micro choice. So, what it means is that your nervous system learns through experience, not through feeling or knowledge. It learns through experience. So small, tolerable shifts create those new neural pathways. And so we get to choose a safer next step. And it doesn't have to be ideal, but we can ask what feels doable in this moment? What is one small step forward I could make? And so I'm fond of saying lower the bar. So if you think about this little micro choice, it's helping. It's like the building block of getting away from self sabotage and into a regulated response. And so aim for a 10 to 20% change, not 100%. We're not trying to dramatically flip the switch. We're trying to build resilience. We're trying to build new neural pathways, which comes from repetition, which means that consistency is important. And if we do this one grandiose moment, it's often challenging to make that consistent. But small, consistent effort is the key. So instead of, I must finish this project, to, I can open the document. Instead of, oh, I've got to, I need to create an elaborate self care routine. I just need to drink more water. I need to tune in to when I'm thirsty. Instead of saying, oh, I have to have this really perfect, deep conversation, just focus on saying one honest sentence. And so, with these small, regulated micro choices, small things we're doing differently, again, safety breeds consistency, and consistency creates those new neural pathways. So, to just sort of recap, because I know I've shared a lot, and I'm going to put a lot of this in the notes as well. But think about, again, your nervous system path to change. So, regulate the body. Those small places of grounding, the small noticing coming back into our body, and then name the pattern. What's coming up for you? What's familiar? What have you noticed before? Understand the protection. So honor what your nervous system has been doing and thank it for its support. And then we get to move on. Choose that small micro alternative, something slightly different that can help us build consistency and then repeat with compassion again and again. That's how we create those beautiful neural pathways. So we can move from this idea that I sabotage everything or I can't get out of my own way into an actual pattern of how to do that. So I hope this has been helpful. I'm really working on that pathway, regulate the body, name the pattern, understand the protection, choose a safer alternative, repeat with compassion. I'm really working to follow that in my own life when I find myself spinning or falling into old negative thoughts or just noticing when my body is tense. My shoulders are up, my jaw is tight, my gut is disrupted. This path is really helping me calm my nervous system and then recognize there is a way out. I hope this has been helpful. Drop a note if you read the show notes and let me know how it's working out for you. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, thanks for being here.
I want to thank you for tuning in to the Sober Edge podcast. This is a place for important conversations and a safe place to question everything you thought you knew about drinking. If you're looking for your sober edge, I want to invite you to connect with me at thesobernutritionist.com, where you can grab my free resource, Becoming More, a guide to loving your sober life. And I would be so grateful if you enjoyed this podcast, if you would leave a rating and review, as it will help more people find their sober edge.